Plus, I've seen, speaking of Becca from the books, Becca and the Books. Whoa. Hello everybody, my name is Kelsey and we're about to get very, very nerdy with an anti-TBR. This is not a new idea as far as the book internet goes. It's a relatively, I think, older idea on YouTube, but I've never made an anti-TBR. But I was doing the perusal, I was watching my subscription feed, and Becca from Becca and the Books did one that I will, of course, leave linked down below, where she talked about an anti-TBR for books that are coming out this year. And so I thought, that's interesting. How can I make that mine? So I've been inspired by her video, and I'm going to do an anti-TBR that are hyped books, or books that are incredibly loved or popular online, that is like everybody knows about them, and I have no interest in them. So we have 15 books to talk about here. And just a disclaimer, if your favorite's on here, I'm sorry. There are very specific reasons why these books are on this list, which I will talk about as I go through. Everything is linked down below, of course, if you want to check out any of these books for yourself, because sometimes I watch videos of people who are kind of like talking about a book and why they don't like it. And there are elements in a book that they might not like, but I enjoy. And I've definitely added things to my TBR because of that. So, of course, I will leave everything linked down below. I've got my computer in front of me, so we can kind of talk through this list. Very chill video. As you can see, it's very cold today. So big sweatshirt, coffee, tea, whatever you want. Hunker down. We have some things to discuss. Kicking off this video with a biggie, which is Where the Crawdad Sings. This one is by Delia Owens. This one is really popular, I think, recently. I mean, it became really popular. It came out in 2018, and it was kind of popular as a book around that time. And then, of course, the movie adaptation for this book came out last year or the year before. And I don't know what it is. There's just absolutely nothing in this synopsis that is interesting to me. It honestly sounds like kind of a boring book. And I know it's not, because like once I saw a movie trailer for it, I realized there was way more to it. It basically follows this girl who's known as the Marsh Girl, and she kind of lives on her own and unfit for polite society. So a lot of people don't like her because of that. So it does have like a murder mystery element, because someone is found dead and people automatically assume it's her. But this was in like the 60s, and I think it's been a few years, and there's a guy involved, and there's some stuff going down. But there's just something. This is one of the ones that for me is hard to pinpoint why I'm not interested in this, but there is absolutely nothing in the synopsis that sounds interesting, and honestly, I think I might get bored. So I don't ever plan on picking this one up. Another one is Ready Player One. This one, I feel like I watched the movie. I think I've seen the movie of this, if I am correct. This is a like sci-fi sort of story where we follow a guy who is part of this game, and the owner or creator of this game has hidden things in it that if you find it, it's like a VR game. If you find these things, it'll lead you to his fortune, and whoever finds all these things will get his fortune, instead of him leaving it to like a descendant. I'm not even sure if he has a descendant, but it's definitely a very like 80s style, I think, and it's about video games. So I'm not a huge video game person. I like my few. Like, I definitely have some games that are on Wii, and I think my husband has an old Game Boy that there's definitely some things on it. But it's things like Lego, Indiana Jones, and Star Wars, and there's this old Madagascar game that like just nostalgia for me. So there are some things that I do play, but as far as like the bigger ones like Call of Duty, World of Warcraft, stuff like that a lot of people know about, I have no interest in those games. Obviously, if you are a big video game person, that's awesome. I love that for you. That's just not me. So reading a book that's set in a video game sounds boring. Plus, like I said, I think I've seen the movie, so I know the idea of it, and I was not particularly in love with the movie. It's been a long time since I've watched it, so I don't remember exactly, but I just remember like watching it, or at least maybe I didn't watch it, maybe I just know about it, but there was nothing that was interesting about the movie either. So it's like, I don't care. Speaking of Becca and the books, she really likes this book and has read the sequel, and there might be a third one, but I think there's only 2 right now, and was not in love with the second one. So I feel like I don't need to invest my time in this series. So that's one. That's a no for me. Okay, the next one is going to be hella controversial, and I know this. It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. However, this is a stand-in for like all of Colleen Hoover's books. She is not a writer that I have any interest in. There might be like one book. I feel like, what was that one book? There's like a book called Verity, which is the only one that sounds remotely interesting, but not enough for me to actually like go out of my way and try to find it. So this is kind of a stand-in for her. I'm not going to say never for her just because who knows? I know she's still writing things. There might be something that comes out in a little bit. I have some family members that love her books and are interested in my thoughts on them. And I'm like, I don't really know how to feel about this. But I've heard some things about her writing where a lot of her romances are very toxic. And while I can go into a book, I've read my fair share of toxic romances, don't get me wrong. I can go into a book with a toxic romance knowing that it's a toxic romance so that I don't get attached to them. All of her stuff seems to be like that. And I don't know. So this is one that is, I think, crazy popular. That's why I chose this one specifically to be kind of like the placeholder for her. But just like, I don't know what it is. She writes both adult and YA, if I am correct. And I have no interest in a YA contemporary. It doesn't sound interesting. But there are some books on her list that like, maybe one day, but like honestly, I have absolutely no plans in picking her up. I also apologize if you could hear stuff going on outside. I'll try to like fix it in editing, but like they are cutting down trees around my house because there's construction that's been happening for literal years. But I need to film, so apologies. The next 2 don't have anything to do with each other except for my reasoning with them is very, very similar. But the first one is The Secret History by Donna Tartt. This one is a thick one. This is also an author that I've heard mixed reviews on, and this is a very, very thick book. I know a lot of the people that I follow who like this book are big into the annotation and maybe the dark academia side. I don't know if this one is or not. Yeah, I think this one's dark academia, but it's just like, it's thick. It sounds like it's going to be a very dense read. It sounds like it's going to be a very sad read. And dark academia and I are, I'll say acquaintances, because I think there are some dark academia books that I have enjoyed, but overall as like a genre, it doesn't always work for me. So I have no interest in putting my time into a book that is this thick and this dense for a subject matter that I have no interest in. So yeah, this one I think this one's a no. This one, it's just so big, I think, is the problem. And I don't care. The next one is another one. I kind of like lump these 2 together, even though they have nothing to do with each other. But the next one is A Little Life. Now this one, the reason this is on here is, well, there's lots of reasons. The subject matter doesn't sound interesting to me, but the biggest thing is that every single person that I have seen read this book talks about how incredibly sad it is. And there is a ridiculous amount of trigger warnings that comes with this book. And I have no interest in reading a book that I'm just going to sob through. I don't mind a sad read. I don't mind crying during a book, while reading a book. I don't mind, like, there are books that I've read that are about grief, and like those are really good books that I have enjoyed. And I went in knowing that, but there's just something about this one, and like, it just sounds like a lot of people have a lot of issues with this book, and the ones who love it sob and talk about how hard of a read it is and how messy of a read it is, like when it comes to the characters, and just, that sounds like stress I don't need. So this is one that I'm also like not planning on picking up anytime soon, or ever. I'm not planning on picking this one up ever. Okay, the next one is The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. This one is kind of a stand for the series. This is, I think, a trilogy, if I am correct. But, oh, no, yes, it's a trilogy. Sorry, I saw some of the novellas and it threw me off. This is a trilogy, but it's a war fantasy. And a lot of war fantasies I have no interest in. Or militia fantasy. That's what the word I'm looking for. It's military fantasy, which is a buzzword. That is a buzzword that is a almost automatic turnoff for me because I don't like books set in war. I mean, I've read a bunch of books, don't get me wrong, and my reading changes. Like, I've definitely read some books set around like World Wars I and II that I used to be like, absolutely not, and now I'm like, oh, I actually really enjoyed that, and maybe there is some books out there that I would be interested in. But when it comes to fantasy war, I'm like, if this book is just war, no thank you. 1. 2, I have seen a lot of trigger warnings when it comes to this book, and it seems like there is a lot of stuff on there that I'm not sure I could get through. I do not like graphic books. I will read a book, and if it has a graphic moment, that's okay because I didn't know what was coming. But if I go into a book and it's just straight up graphic, gross goriness the entire time, no thank you. So this is one that I don't think I'm ever going to pick up. The next one is Dune. And this one is part of a pretty long series, I want to say. Let me double check that. But it seems like it's pretty long. Oh yeah, there's at least 8 books. It's just one of those older sci-fi books that I just am not interested in. It takes place in a desert setting, if I am correct. Or like a desert setting on like a planet or something. It does have some royalty in it because it says that the main guy is heir to a noble family. But it's all about like an inhospitable world, and even the like trailer for the movie adaptation, no. I don't know. There's just something about like the covers are kind of cool, but there's nothing about this that sounds interesting, and I'm not a big fan of kind of like older sci-fi. Sci-fi and I are very like baby friends, like more of acquaintances than friends, let's say, where like I like a good sci-fi. I'll definitely read a good sci-fi, but the older sci-fis are usually things that are not interesting to me. I'm not usually a fan of how they're written. I've read my fair share of older sci-fis, and I just have found in the past they have not worked for me. There's just something about this. The setting sounds awful, and I just find myself being very ambivalent and not really caring about what this one's about. So that's also another one that's probably going to never get read. Another one that was really popular that is kind of again in that like dark academia vibe is The Maidens by Alex Michaelides. Is that how you say it? The general idea of this book is interesting because there is a murder mystery element to it, so I'm interested in that, which is why this is the only one on this list that has a question mark next to it for me, because maybe one day I will pick this up because I'll be intrigued enough, because it is set at a college, like it's dark academia, it's set at a college, it's got a group of girls called the Maidens who are fixated by a therapist. That makes me uncomfortable. Any books about therapy where the therapist does things that are like not ethical or icky in any way make me uncomfortable, so that one's not a big fan. But it is set like around Cambridge, so like there are elements of this that is interesting, but again, dark academia has not really worked out much in the past for me. So this is definitely one that like I would say maybe is not super popular compared to some of the other books on this list, but is definitely one that I don't know. There's something about it that is interesting to me and like a baby element, but with my experience in the past, based on other books like this, I'm thinking this one's probably going to be a no. Okay, the next one is one that, again, is one that's on this list. And the only way I would ever read this is because my husband loves it and he would make me if I got like a pick from him from the TBR basket or something. But it's A Man Called Ove, or Uwe, depending on how you pronounce it, by Frederick Bachman. I think Frederick Bachman is a fascinating writer to kind of be on the outside of, because so many people love his books, but a lot of his books are really hard topics and I have no interest in them. But he just has a way of writing books that make people cry, and that's great, and I love that for you if you are a big Frederick Bachman fan, but like nothing about his book sounds interesting to me. But my husband loved A Man Called Ove. It was in a weird way. Like he said he hated every like aspect of the book, and I was gonna get a 1-star until like the last little section of the end, which bumped into a 5-star. And that, the idea of having to push through that much to get to a decent end sounds awful. I also know this is about a man living alone, so I know it's not going to be like the happiest of stories. I'm interested in watching the movie, though. I will say this is one of the books that, like, the movie, which has Tom Hanks in it, I think it's called A Man Called Otto, is what they've done. I think they might have changed elements of the story to make it a little bit happier. I don't know. There's just elements of it that I've heard Chris talk about, and it just sounds not at all interesting. So this is one that I would never pick up for myself, but if I ever got a, like, husband picks a book for me, I know for a fact he's going to pick this book, and I am honestly dreading that. But there's nothing about this book that sounds boring, to be completely honest. Another one, Nevernight. This one is the start of a series. There's a bunch of stuff about this author that has been circulating online about whether, you know, if he's a good person or not. This book is on here because I know that this is a super, super violent book, and I have no interest in that. Like I said earlier when I was talking about, I think it was the Poppy War, gore and violence and graphicness like that does absolutely nothing for me. Honestly, it turns me off so much. And also, like, I am a super baby and squeamish when it comes to those kinds of things. So the idea of getting through a book like this sounds awful. I don't think there's anything about the synopsis in general that is interesting to me, but I know based on reviews that I've seen and heard that this is not a book that people, like, that you can go in lightly. It's definitely super gory. So that's the biggest one right there. No thank you. Try again. The next one is basically the same exact reasoning as Dune, and that is The Martian. This is another sci-fi book set on a kind of like a desert planet. I mean, it's not a desert planet. I think it's set on Mars. And it's this guy, and he's on his own. I know there's a movie and people have enjoyed it. And I think this is by Alison Weir, if I am correct. Let me look that up before I lie to you. Andy Weir. And there's definitely books by this author that I have been intrigued by. Not enough to do anything about, but definitely they're on my radar of, like, maybe we'll see. But this one, it doesn't fall necessarily in the, like, older sci-fi writing vibes, but there's just the idea of this man living on his own and trying to survive, like survival stories. Not the biggest fan of those. I don't know what it is about them. I just don't care about them as much. And this one, again, desert planet in the middle of nowhere. He's on his own. I think he does some graphic things to survive, which, honestly, fair. I know there's a mystery element to it. So I know a lot of people like this, but this is, again, kind of pretty far into the sci-fi realm that I just don't really care about. There's just nothing that sounds interesting. Okay, this next one is like an entire series, and that is the Zodiac Academy series. And this is one that I've heard you either love or hate. And I've heard more in the hate category than the love category. Plus, there's like a ton of books, and I'd have to dedicate my time. I'm now going through to make sure. 7, 8, 9. There's 9 books, and I think the 9th one comes out this year. And so I've heard things about this. I've seen people read this book and not really love it, and I trust their opinions on it. And I've also heard that, like, the relationships are kind of toxic, and that the romance elements of this book, it's like a bully romance, if I am correct, because it follows these 2 twins who are fae, maybe, and go to, like, a spiritual academy where everyone looks badly on them. Maybe they're not fae. And so I know that the love interest, like, it takes a long time. Like, it takes multiple books for the love interest to show up. And that you have to get through the first few books, like 4 or 5 books, before it gets good. And I don't want to do that. I've said that before when it comes to, like, the Throne of Glass series, where people said, wait till you get to the 4th book. And with Sarah J. Maas, I am willing to give her the benefit of the doubt. Now, it turned out that I loved the first one, so it was okay. But, like, I was willing to give her the benefit of the doubt because I love that author. I don't know either of these authors. It's Caroline Heckman and Suzanne Valenti. I've never read anything by these authors that I know of, and I've never heard of them. I don't know them. The idea of dedicating that much time to a book or to a series before it gets good sounds awful. So That's a no. That one's a no. Also, the series is way too long for me to invest in. Like I said, I keep referencing Throne of Glass, but Throne of Glass is 8 books long. I am willing to give an 8-book series a try because I've loved that author and things like that. Like, I'm definitely willing to give long series a try, but when it's something like this where I have no interest to begin with, no thank you. No thank you. The next one is another kind of author one, and that is A Deadly Education by Naomi Novik. This, I think, is a trilogy. I've heard, again, not the most amazing things about this book. I think you either love it or hate it. But actually, that's not true. I feel like you either love it or you're ambivalent. And so there's a lot of people, I think, that are in that like middle ambivalent stage. But I have read something by this author, and I DNF'd it halfway through. So I think I'm kind of done with this author, unless she comes out with something that is like the most amazing sounding book in the world. And I'm kind of still like, she's still on my radar. I still see people talk about her books. But this series sounds like every other series. It's a magical kind of school book. It does sound a little bit darker. So like the plot itself sounds a little interesting, but the author, I'm so nervous about anything by this author because I did not enjoy whatever. I don't even remember what I read by her. It was one of the ones that's based on like fairy tales. It was, Uprooted. That's the one that I DNF'd, and it was mostly the writing style that I didn't like. So yeah, that one's on there mostly because the author. There's 2 more left. We're almost to the end, and these are both, I feel like, very controversial, so I apologize in advance. The next one is The Vampire Academy, and this is on here for multiple reasons. One, I've talked a lot about in this video my thing with gore and blood that translates a lot to vampire books. Do I get over it for some authors? Yes, I did an entire vlog last year where I tortured myself by reading vampire books, and they actually turned out okay. But as a general rule, if a book is involving a vampire, I am very, very hesitant going in. And there has to be something else that's very fascinating to me about the plot line for me to give it a shot. A. B, this is a pretty old series. I think it's within the same kind of vein as a lot of the old dystopian books, like a lot of the teen books that were popular, like the Twilight series, the Divergent series, the Maze Runner series, things like that. And I think that those would hit not the best with me because it's been so long and I didn't read this series when I was a teen. If I had read the series when I was a teen and maybe was rereading it now, we might be having a different conversation. But because I would be reading it for the first time, there's just something about that writing style that I fear I wouldn't be giving this series enough of a chance because of that writing style and because it was meant for an older, like YA kind of vibe. Like older as in publication older. So yeah, I think I would be doing this series a disservice if I tried to read it now. Also, vampires, and I have no interest. Also, I'm pretty sure it's like a super long series as well. And like the idea of, again, dedicating that much time to a series that I'm not even sure I'm gonna love sounds awful. There are 6 books, so it's not super, super long. For some reason, I thought it was much longer, but it's still a lot of books that I just don't really care about. And I know there was a TV show that came out that I'm pretty sure a lot of fans of the series did not enjoy, so it's not the best adaptation, and even that adaptation didn't look like, I didn't watch it, but the trailers of it, I was like, there's nothing about this that sounds interesting to me. So I think it would hit me at the wrong time, age-wise, because it's set for younger teens, I think, and being about to turn 30 in like a year and a half, that sounds not fun. So we're going to skip on that one. And the very last one is Game of Thrones, the entire Game of Thrones series. I struggle with this one because, one, I'm doing numbers apparently for some reason. One, I think I would enjoy the world of this. I think the world of this, like the TV show always sounded a little bit interesting to me because of the whole like world and the dragons, and you have all these different mythical creatures and you've got all these different feuding families, and it's set in like a medieval vibe, like an older like time period kind of vibe, which I love. The books I think would be really, really dense and hard to get through when it comes to world building. So like I would give the TV show a shot, but not the books a shot on that thing. However, we get to the second point. The second point is This series is so incredibly gory. I'm thinking of the TV show specifically because I know that I've heard some things about the TV show, and with it being based on this book series, I'm thinking that I just would not enjoy this because of all the gore and the blood, and there's all these different trigger warnings that you have, like there's incest involved in it. So like there's just a lot of things about this series that doesn't sound interesting. They're thick books. Also, isn't he like not done with the series, if I am correct? Like we're still waiting for the next book that's supposed to be coming out, and people who love the series have been waiting for literal years. A lot of stuff like that. But the third reason, which is a little bit personal, is I had an ex-boyfriend who loved this series, and that's not the reason it's on this list. I remember him talking about this book in the car and kind of explaining the world and the families to me, and just in like the 15 to 20 minute car ride that he was trying to explain this to me, I was so confused and spaced out so many times. So I know from experience, having heard people talk about the series, I just don't think it's going to be interesting. Like, honestly, there's a lot of reasons it's on this list. Dense, gory, high epic fantasy, which doesn't always sit with me. So that one's also a no. That one's a no in the place of the entire series. I just have no interest, and I don't want to be strung along, even if I do get interested. But I think it would take me months to get through a book. So there's so many other things I would prefer to read. And that's it. That was a look at 15 books and or book series or authors that I have no interest in picking up. I think there's definitely some caveats with some of these that you might see in the future. I might change my mind as my reading tastes change, because I know there's definitely things that I'm reading now that I never would have read before, or there's things that I picked up before that I'm not interested in now. So things happen, but overall, this is my hyped books anti-TBR, and I hope I didn't offend you, and I hope you enjoyed. But as always, let me know what you guys think down below. What are some books that you would have on your anti-TBR? Is there an author here and or a book series that you're like, no, I know your tastes, you should try that? Let me know. Overall, I'm not feeling the vibe on all of these, but I would still love to know all your bookish thoughts nicely down below. But if you like this video, and I very much hope that you did, don't forget to give it a big thumbs up and subscribe down below if you'd like to be part of this awesome growing family. I've also got my social media down there, as well as other fun bookish links, so don't forget to check all of it out, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye!